He tried to dissolve his pregnant wife in acid. Arnima Hayat was originally from Bangladesh but ended up relocating to Australia, and she had dreams of becoming a surgeon. At 19 years old, she met a fellow medical student, Miraj Safar. The two fell in love and ended up getting married in a private Islamic wedding without any friends or family present. Her family didn't see her again once she got married, and the couple moved into a home in North Parramatta in Australia. Within weeks of them being married, Arnima was already pregnant with their first child. Arnima describes life with Miraj anything but happy. He was very controlling and abusive. He would punch, kick, and slap her, and she would desperately tell her friends that she wanted to get out of this marriage. However, her leaving this relationship was going to be very difficult because she was afraid that he would take her life if she wanted to get a divorce. Arnima told Miraj through text message that she was going to report him to the police for what he has done to her and that she didn't want her son to be just like him, and he replied saying that all of their sons were going to be just like him. On January 22nd of 2022, Miraj saw text messages on Arnima's phone between her and her friend telling her how much she hated her husband. This caused him to fly into a rage and he took her life. He then started to Google, can hydrochloric acid burn through skin, and how many years do you get for murder? Miraj then was seen on CCTV footage driving his truck to a store buying 5 20-liter tubs of acid. When he got home, he dumped the acid into the bathtub and then grabbed Arnima's lifeless body and dumped her in the tub. Later that night, Miraj called his mom to let her know that him and Arnima got into an argument and she was no longer breathing. Police arrived to the home and Miraj was arrested. Arnima was unable to be identified due to the decomposition of the acid, but later on they were able to identify her with DNA samples. In 2024, Miraj pled guilty and was sentenced to 21 years and 6 months in prison, but will be eligible for parole in 2038.
Okay, so the official story is that this 19-year-old vanished, took all of his clothes off, unalived himself in a ditch, flung his trainers in a tree, hid his own shorts, and washed his hat. Apparently that's not a suspicious death. It was July 2019 in Barlanach in Glasgow. Rhys Bonner was a normal 19-year-old guy. He lived with his mum Stephanie and he was part of a big family. He actually had 5 siblings. On the 24th of the month, he told his mum he was going out for a bit to McDonald's, and his mum said he had a girlfriend at the time that he used to hang out with quite a lot, and she just presumed that he was going there with her. He did also mention to her that he would be back later to go to watch a Celtic football game with his granddad. But strangely, he never returned home. Now, initially, Rhys's mum thought maybe he'd changed his mind, maybe he'd carried on hanging out with the girlfriend. She wasn't too concerned. The next day came, and still no news from Rhys, no call, no contact from him. So his mum, really concerned by this point, went to Facebook, popped a status up and asked if anybody had seen her son. And then the next day came and went, and again still no sign from Rhys. Stephanie had been searching high and low by this point with other family members as well, and they were still no closer to understanding where Rhys was. So she decided to report him missing to police. Now, interestingly, Rhys had been spotted on CCTV, as you can see here, wearing a long-sleeved green Celtic FC training top, blue shorts and black Nike trainers just before 8 p.m. on the same day that he disappeared. He was also seen on CCTV walking along a local street with a woman, but this wasn't his girlfriend. This was a local woman who was in her 40s. And we will come back to this woman in just a minute. This didn't explain where Rhys was, obviously, but it was promising that he was at least captured on CCTV. However, on the 8th of August, there was a devastating discovery. Found in marshland between Easterhouse and Gartlock village was Rhys's body. And this was shocking because it was clearly, in my opinion, no accident. Rhys was half naked, wearing just a top and boxers. His trainers were dangling from a nearby tree as if they'd been flung up there. His shorts were also nowhere to be seen, and strangely his hat was discovered nearby, but it smelt really strongly of washing powder, almost like it had been washed. Now, obviously, you would expect the police to be there processing the scene like a crime scene, but weirdly, police just said that they had been unable to collect DNA from the crime scene. And I'm like, what do you mean? Police supposedly did get an autopsy conducted, but no cause of death was ever determined. His death was just listed as unascertained and ruled not suspicious. Police claimed that it was likely that drowning caused or played a role. So why was he in his boxers? That doesn't explain why he would randomly get undressed. And why had his trainers been thrown in the air? Why were his shorts missing? Who's taken his shorts? It made zero sense. Back to the woman that Reese had been spotted with, Stephanie, his mum, said she was well known in the area and to police. And rumours circulated in the area that the woman had previously battered somebody with a baseball bat and had held young boys at her home. Now, bear in mind, this is just like local hearsay. Despite this, despite how suspicious this death is, police have not identified any suspects or people of interest. Like I said, they just claim this has obviously been an accident, but some people believe that because the shorts are missing, that meant maybe it was like a robbery gone wrong, or maybe he was SA'd. Stephanie states, "My son's killer is still out there. A young 19-year-old boy doesn't just take his clothes off and hide in a ditch." Reese was a very normal teenage lad. He didn't have any enemies. He wasn't involved in any criminality. So there really is no motive or obvious motive anyway. What are your theories about this case? Do you believe this was an accident, or do you believe there was something more going on here?
There's a really strange missing persons case happening right now that everybody should be talking about. This is Nancy Ng. She went missing during a yoga retreat to Guatemala last month. The details in this case are bizarre because it involves a whole group of people who basically witnessed Nancy go missing, yet most of them refused to talk to authorities. So on October 14th, Nancy left her home in Monterey Park, California to go on a week-long yoga retreat to Lake Atitlan. This would have been her second year in a row doing this, and it was just something that she was really excited about because she loved the area and it was supposed to be just really relaxing. But just a few days into the trip, the organizer of the retreat called Nancy's family and told them that she disappeared. She was officially reported missing on October 20th, but the few details that we do have are really strange. Nancy was seen for the last time in this video, which was taken on October 19th. She was paddling on a kayak on Lake Atitlan and happily waving to someone off camera. She was with a group of 9 other tourists who traveled to Guatemala for the retreat as well. Nancy was last seen splitting up from the group with another woman to continue kayaking up the lake. According to that woman, the two paddled for roughly another mile before Nancy jumped into the lake and either drowned or disappeared. The woman said she then paddled back to the group, where they then all went back to the hotel where they were all staying and notified management. And when the hotel staff searched for Nancy and couldn't find her, that's when they called the police to report her missing. But this is when things start to get strange. According to the kayak company, who recently made a statement, all 9 of the other tourists in that retreat returned home the day Nancy disappeared. They all reportedly left the lake without saying a word, and they all checked out of the hotel within 12 hours and never paid for the excursion. On top of that, almost all of the witnesses in that retreat group have chosen not to come forward and talk with police. They never gave any witness statements, and they haven't been forthcoming with any information, which has severely hindered the investigation. Guatemalan officials searched the lake and Nancy's hotel room, but they suspended the search after just 3 days after finding no evidence. According to them, the weather made it difficult and affected the search. They believe Nancy drowned that day, and because there's no sense of any urgency to continue looking for her, this forced Nancy's family to hire an independent search and rescue team called Black Wolf Helicopters. They've been the only ones to extensively search the lake and surrounding areas for any clues as to what may have happened to Nancy. They've searched 95% of Lake Atitlan using helicopters, boat teams, and divers. But Nancy is still missing, and because not really anyone in the group is coming forward to talk with police, they stated that it should now be considered a criminal investigation. The woman's identity, who was last seen with Nancy, has not been released to the public that I can find, but according to Nancy's family, they know who she is, and they've even tried reaching out to her multiple times for some answers. Yet that woman has refused to speak with them. And what's also strange is that this woman reportedly told Guatemalan officials that Nancy drowned that day, but that witness statement is nowhere in the official police report. So at this point, with no one coming forward and suspicious witnesses with key information that's being withheld, nobody knows what to think. The FBI is now investigating Nancy's disappearance, and her family has since hired a lawyer in Guatemala to investigate whether or not she actually drowned. Unfortunately, Black Wolf Helicopters have since had to suspend their search, but they're demanding that someone in the group come forward to at least tell them where Nancy went into the lake, because it would be incredibly helpful to at least have a starting point. This situation is an absolute nightmare. I've attached a GoFundMe created for Nancy's family to help them continue funding the search, because as of right now, most of the search and rescue operations have been primarily funded by them, which is not fair at all. Any funds raised will go towards the search as well as travel expenses for the family, as they're wanting to be in Guatemala as much as possible. It's now been 3 weeks since Nancy went missing. It's time to find her.
A nun with a dark past and a secret, fighting to uncover corruption and help save the lives of the most vulnerable children. Final Vow is a movie that you don't want to miss. When a 15-year-old girl is adopted from a Mexican orphanage run by nuns, Sister Anne-Marie begins to grow suspicious. She suspects that the couple who adopted the young girl has sold her to a local trafficking gang. Having a dark past of her own, Sister Anne-Marie dedicated herself to protecting the most innocent, vulnerable children, and she will stop at nothing. She faces danger, her own demons, and the horrifying truth on what really goes on within these trafficking gangs. Final Vow is a gripping, thrilling drama feature film that highlights the issue of trafficking and aims to educate the viewer to take action. It's a film that really opened my eyes and showed us how sadly so many people fall through the cracks. Using an innovative AI chat, you can speak to the characters and the creators of the film to ask them questions and learn more about their backstory. Something I have never seen before, and it just adds that extra layer and extra depth. I'm a person that always has 1,000 questions, and this feature will help answer them all. Tune into the award-winning movie exclusively on their website at https://finalvow.com to rent or buy the movie and take part in a one-of-a-kind experience interacting with the characters and the creators.
If you didn't already believe in police cover-ups, oh, you will by the time you're done hearing about Christian Andreacchio's case. And if you're not already familiar with this case, part 1 is linked below. When we left off in part 1, Christian had just driven 3 hours with his friend Dylan to go home and break up with his girlfriend Whitley, and then was found dead by Dylan only a couple hours later. When police arrived at the scene, they found Christian slumped over his bathtub and ruled that Christian had unalived himself after an investigation that only lasted less than 1 hour. Christian's friend Dylan and his girlfriend Whitley were the only people in his apartment when he passed away, and both of their stories of events are confusing to say the least. Dylan says that him and Christian got to his apartment around 11, and quickly Christian and Whitley started fighting. That during the fight, Christian put a pew-pew weapon up against his head and asked Whitley if she loved him. Then Dylan says that he took the weapon from Christian, and then things immediately calmed down and the three of them sat down and watched a movie. Around 12 p.m., Dylan said that he was going to go pick up food for everyone, and he says that Christian gave Dylan his debit card and told him to drain his bank account. At 12:30, Dylan goes to Christian's bank and tries to withdraw all the money out of the bank accounts, but luckily the bank did not allow this. And instead of calling Christian to help authorize this withdrawal, Dylan called his friend who worked at the bank and begged him for help, but this did not work either. Then Dylan says that he went back to Christian's apartment and the trio sat down to watch a second movie. And if you remember from part 1, Christian only had 3 hours from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. to break up with Whitley and then get back to work, a job that he was passionate about and wouldn't risk losing. And now he's just sitting on the couch with this girl that he was trying to break up with, watching 2 movies. Then Dylan says that after watching the second movie, he took a 2-hour nap. And then once he woke up, he thought it was the perfect time to go to Best Buy. But before going to Best Buy, Dylan said that Whitley was sleeping in another room and Christian was sitting alone in the living room. And before leaving, he gave Christian back the weapon that he took from Christian. You know, the weapon that he had said that Christian had just put up to his head a couple hours earlier. And then when Dylan returned from Best Buy, he said that he woke up Whitley to find Christian because they couldn't find him, and then they found him unalived in the bathroom with a shot to the head. In Whitley's statement, she doesn't mention anything about a fight with Christian having a weapon up to his head, or the fact that they watched 2 movies. She only says that her and Christian talked for a little bit, and then she slept in a separate room until her and Dylan found Christian's body. I'm guessing by this point in the video, y'all are picking up on the fact that I do not believe that Christian Andreacchio unalived himself. Actually, I believe that Dylan and Whitley lured Christian off the boat so they could bring him back home, unalive him, and steal his money. Personally, I think that Christian was dead by 12:30 when Dylan went to go drain his bank account. And there's even more evidence that supports this theory, so we're gonna have to do one more part. So comment for part 3. His mom took his life because of his sexuality. 17-year-old Itamaruli Lozano lived with his mother Tatiana, stepfather, and younger sibling in Brazil. From photos, it seemed like they were a happy family, but it was far from that. When Taberly came out to his mom saying that he was gay, their relationship deteriorated. She was not going to accept that, and she wanted nothing to do with him. Because of this, it resulted in her beating him, and she would tell guys from their neighborhood that if they were ever to see him, to beat him as well. This would cause endless fights with his mom, so Taberly just decided to just live with his grandmother for a bit. On December 29th of 2016, Taberly received a phone call from his mom, Tatiana, that she wanted him to go over so that they could talk in person and reconcile. He was very happy about this because he loved his mother so much and he was hoping things would just turn around, but he was wrong. When Taberly arrived at her home, he was greeted by two men, Victor and Millard da Silva. They were hitmen hired by Tatiana so that they could teach her son a lesson. These men beat Taberly but refused to unalive him, so Tatiana grabbed a kitchen knife and just did it herself. Tatiana and her husband took Taberly's body to a cane field and lit it on fire. His body was found about a week later and forensic investigation was needed in order to identify his body. When Tatiana was brought in for questioning, she stated that it wasn't because she was homophobic, it was because Taberly would bring home men, he would do substances, and he had even tried to unalive her. The two men were sentenced to 21 years and 8 months in prison, and Tatiana was sentenced to 25 years and 8 months.
After trying to break up a fight, he was stabbed in the heart while protecting his friend. Before that day changed everything, 14-year-old Armando Morales was the kind of kid who could make an entire room laugh. Friends described him as the class clown, the kid who was always joking around, making people smile and bringing energy wherever he went. He wasn't known for getting in trouble, and nobody who knew him could have imagined that his name would one day make headlines across the country. But on May 7, 2025, a normal school day turned deadly. That afternoon, students poured out of Santa Ana High School after the final bell. As everyone started heading home, an argument broke out in the parking lot shared by the high school and a nearby elementary school. At first, it was just yelling, then more teenagers got involved. Then people started gathering around to watch, and before long, the situation had completely gotten out of hand. Investigators would later reveal that the argument was connected to rival gangs, but Armando wasn't part of that world. In fact, he had no gang affiliations whatsoever. He wasn't even supposed to be involved, but as the confrontation escalated, one of Armando's friends became caught up in the fight, and Armando did what a lot of loyal friends would do. He stepped in. Unfortunately, that's when everything went wrong. During the chaos, knives were pulled, and 3 teenage boys were stabbed. 2 of them survived, but Armando didn't. While trying to protect his friend, the 14-year-old was stabbed in the heart. Armando was rushed to a nearby hospital, but despite efforts to save him, he later died from his injuries. The news devastated the community. Students, parents, and loved ones struggled to understand how a teenager who wasn't even involved in the original argument had lost his life. Just hours later, 2 brothers aged 15 and 17 walked into the Santa Ana Police Department with their parents and turned themselves in. The youngest brother was charged with murder and 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. The oldest was booked with suspicion of murder and attempted murder. Because both suspects are juveniles, many details surrounding the case have remained private. In the months that followed, Armando's family searched for answers. They eventually filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Santa Ana School District, claiming the district failed to provide adequate supervision and ignored safety concerns. Today, the people who loved Armando don't remember him for how he died. They remember the kid who made them laugh, the kid who could brighten up a room, and the kid who used his final breath to help someone else. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
If you didn't already believe in police cover-ups, oh, you will by the time you're done hearing about Christian Andreacchio's case. And if you're not already familiar with this case, part 1 is linked below. When we left off in part 1, Christian had just driven 3 hours with his friend Dylan to go home and break up with his girlfriend Whitley, and then was found dead by Dylan only a couple hours later. When police arrived at the scene, they found Christian slumped over his bathtub and ruled that Christian had unalived himself after an investigation that only lasted less than 1 hour. Christian's friend Dylan and his girlfriend Whitley were the only people in his apartment when he passed away, and both of their stories of events are confusing to say the least. Dylan says that him and Christian got to his apartment around 11 and quickly Christian and Whitley started fighting. That during the fight, Christian put a pew-pew weapon up against his head and asked Whitley if she loved him. Then Dylan says that he took the weapon from Christian and then things immediately calmed down and the 3 of them sat down and watched a movie. Around 12 p.m., Dylan said that he was going to go pick up food for everyone. And he says that Christian gave Dylan his debit card and told him to drain his bank account. At 12:30, Dylan goes to Christian's bank and tries to withdraw all the money out of the bank accounts, but luckily the bank did not allow this. And instead of calling Christian to help authorize this withdrawal, Dylan called his friend who worked at the bank and begged him for help, but this did not work either. Then Dylan says that he went back to Christian's apartment and the trio sat down to watch a second movie. And if you remember from part 1, Christian only had 3 hours from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. to break up with Whitley and then get back to work, a job that he was passionate about and wouldn't risk losing. And now he's just sitting on the couch with this girl that he was trying to break up with, watching 2 movies. Then Dylan says that after watching the second movie, he took a 2-hour nap. And then once he woke up, he thought it was the perfect time to go to Best Buy. But before going to Best Buy, Dylan said that Whitley was sleeping in another room and Christian was sitting alone in the living room. And before leaving, he gave Christian back the weapon that he took from Christian. You know, the weapon that he had said that Christian had just put up to his head a couple hours earlier. And then when Dylan returned from Best Buy, he said that he woke up Whitley to find Christian because they couldn't find him. And then they found him unalived in the bathroom with a shot to the head. In Whitley's statement, she doesn't mention anything about a fight with Christian having a weapon up to his head, or the fact that they watched 2 movies. She only says that her and Christian talked for a little bit, and then she slept in a separate room until her and Dylan found Christian's body. I'm guessing by this point in the video, y'all are picking up on the fact that I do not believe that Christian Andreacchio unalived himself. Actually, I believe that Dylan and Whitley lured Christian off the boat so they could bring him back home, unalive him, and steal his money. Personally, I think that Christian was dead by 12:30 when Dylan went to go drain his bank account. And there's even more evidence that supports this theory, so we're gonna have to do one more part. So comment for part 3.
This 14-year-old boy essayed his 83-year-old neighbor. On August 29th of 2018, 14-year-old Tyrone Harvin told his 83-year-old neighbor Dorothy Mae Neal that he would help her with some chores inside of her apartment. Before walking into her apartment, he made sure to grab a handful of condoms. Tyrone did help Dorothy with some chores before attacking her with a lamp. After that, he essayed her, fled the apartment, and left her seriously injured on the floor naked. A couple of days passed by and neighbors asked police to do a welfare check on Dorothy since they hadn't seen her around. When officers arrived to the apartment, they noticed dry blood on the doorknob, and when they went inside, they saw her lying naked on the floor. Dorothy was taken to the University of Maryland Hospital Trauma Unit but passed away that very next day. When officers were at Dorothy's apartment, they noticed several condom wrappers around her body as well as used condoms. Aside from that, they also found a broken, bloodied lamp. Dorothy's autopsy revealed that she suffered extensive trauma from her head to her private area. DNA was found on Dorothy's body and in those condoms, and that DNA linked to Tyrone. Despite all of the evidence, Tyrone's mom stood by his side and truly believed that he would never do something like this. On June 29th of 2022, Tyrone was convicted of first-degree murder, first-degree essay, and use of a deadly weapon and was sentenced to life in prison.
This woman was recently found stabbed to death in the parking garage of a Boston airport, and now there's an international manhunt for the man responsible as he quickly boarded a flight to Kenya. This is Maggie Mbitu. She was a 31-year-old nurse who was last seen alive leaving her job at around 11 p.m. on October 30th of this year. She was finishing up her shift in Boston and then was planning to get ready for an upcoming girls' trip to Vegas. But when she didn't show up for work the next day, her employer immediately knew something was wrong. Her job as a nurse was extremely important to her, and she would never no-call, no-show. So Maggie's employer reached out to her family, who then contacted the police to officially report her missing. Somehow, information that police collected led them to Kevin Kangete, who knew Maggie. When authorities tracked Maggie's cell phone records, they found that her phone was in the same vicinity as Kevin's SUV, which was located via license plate recognition cameras. They then tracked his SUV to the Logan Airport parking garage, and this is when they discovered a gruesome scene. There in the front passenger seat of Kevin's car was Maggie's body. She had been slashed and stabbed to death with severe wounds on her neck and face. Authorities began looking for Kevin, and with security footage provided by the airport, he was spotted entering the airport terminal and boarding a flight. It was then discovered that Kevin had purchased a ticket to Kenya the morning before Maggie's body was found. As of right now, Kevin remains on the run and has fled the country, but police are working with authorities in Kenya to locate him. And it's reported that Kenya does have an extradition treaty with the US. Maggie was the youngest in a family of nurses, and she worked as a nurse for about 7 years. She was described as warm and caring, and she absolutely took pride in her job. She was a woman who loved to travel, and she was just looking forward to spending some time with her friends on a girls' trip. I've attached a GoFundMe in my bio for Maggie's family to help with expenses during this horrific time. Please consider donating or sharing, and please keep Maggie and her family in your thoughts. Justice for Maggie Mbitu.
I want to start off this video by saying something Gabby's mom said in regards to the recent documentary. She said, quote, "When you're watching a documentary like this, remember that it's not just a story, it's not just entertainment for you, it's not just true crime. Remember that there are always real lives involved and that these things can happen to anyone, so choose empathy and kindness every day because everybody's going through something. That's how Gabby lived her life," end quote. So whether you watch the documentary or you listen to this video, keep that in mind. These are real people with real lives. Please be kind. The documentary honestly hit me so hard, specifically a specific look on Gabby's face, because I know that look and it broke my heart to see it on her face, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Gabby Petito was a beautiful 22-year-old girl who grew up in New York on Long Island. She was born to parents Nicole and Joe, who separated soon after Gabby's birth, although they did keep a very healthy friendship and were able to co-parent. Both of her parents later remarried, and Gabby built relationships with her stepdad as well as her stepmom, and from the looks of it, she had a very strong relationship with all four of them. Gabby's parents always made sure to put her first, and so did her step-parents. She was a very loved girl. She has been described as loud, creative, artistic, adventurous, friendly, and kind. Gabby met Brian Laundrie in 2019. They both described the first time they saw each other as love at first sight, although they were not complete strangers because they had common friends in high school, but it wasn't until after high school that they connected romantically. A massive part of Gabby's life was vlogging. She loved being in front of the camera. It was something that she was incredibly passionate about, something she loved to do and found a lot of fun in. And her hope was to one day become a full-time YouTube vlogger, which plays a massive part in this case because we have so much footage of Gabby and Brian from the start of their relationship recorded by Gabby herself. So it really shows a timeline of their relationship and the way that they interacted with each other. When Gabby's parents and step-parents met Brian, they thought that he was nice, kind of quiet, a little bit reserved, but overall a pretty nice guy. Gabby ended up moving to Florida. She moved in with Brian and his family. At the start, it sounds like Brian's family loved Gabby and they treated her well, but then his mom started becoming almost jealous of Gabby and how much time she was spending with Brian. In Florida, Gabby became best friends with a girl named Rose. They spent a lot of time together, and eventually Rose met Brian. Her first impression of him was that he was really nice, but she could feel that there was something off about him. Slowly but surely, Rose began to see how Brian really treated Gabby because they seemed like they were very happy, very in love, but behind the scenes and behind social media, it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies. Gabby and Brian would argue often, and Rose began to notice that their arguments were almost repetitive. It almost seemed like there was a pattern to them. Brian would become very upset, very angry, and put the blame on Gabby. Gabby would apologize profusely and convince herself that things were her fault. Brian would manipulate her psychologically into making her feel remorseful. And then somehow it always ended up with Gabby apologizing and Brian forgiving her for things that were not her fault, but that would make Gabby feel grateful for Brian and thankful that he forgave her. And the little times that Brian would take the fault for things, he would follow it up with doing something really nice for Gabby, give her gifts, take her on nice dates to convince her that she was lucky to have him, and this would show later in journal entries of Gabby's. And it's a really common thing, unfortunately, for relationships that are not healthy. For example, Gabby had plans one night to go out with Rose. She was super late to meet up with Rose. Rose asked what was going on, and Gabby said that her and Brian got in an argument over Brian not wanting Gabby to go out. He stole her wallet and her ID to prevent her from going out, leaving Gabby in tears. She was still crying when she did eventually show up to Rose's house. By July of 2020, Brian and Gabby had been dating for 1 year and 3 months. He proposes to her with no ring. He said that he would get a ring later, but he proposed to Gabby and she said yes. Brian announced their engagement on social media with a caption that said, quote, "My biggest fear is that one day I'll wake up and it will have all been a dream, because that is what every second has felt like since the moment we found each other. Till death do us part, or until I wake up. I'm so happy the answer was yes. Love you, honey," end quote. Almost a year later, in July of 2021, Brian and Gabby get ready to leave on a 4-month-long cross-country road trip around the United States. The day they left for their van life road trip, Nicole, Gabby's mom, looked at Brian and said, "You take care of her, you keep her safe," and Brian promised that he would. Gabby Petito would never return home. Gabby kept up the vlogging throughout their road trip. Although Brian was never really supportive of it, he thought that it was stupid, and of course the content that she was putting out there were the highlights of the trip, the good stuff, the fun stuff. But when footage was released after Gabby's death, all the clips that she cut out showed what Brian's behavior was really like, and it was written all over his face that he wasn't supportive and he did seem bothered by it. This is a quote from one of Gabby's journal entries, quote, "I feel bad I'm always on my phone. I should give Brian more attention. He loves me so much. I don't deserve it, but I'm lucky that he sticks with me," end quote. August 12th of 2021, Gabby and Brian were in Moab, Utah. The police received a call from a person who was concerned because they saw a man slapping a woman. The caller reported this to police, described the vehicle that they were in, which was Gabby's white van, and then further explained that he saw the man hit the woman. They hopped in the car, drove off. Police find them. They speak to Gabby and Brian separately. Gabby explains that she has really bad OCD and really bad anxiety, that they were having a rough morning and had been arguing. She takes full accountability. She says, "It's my fault. I got frustrated. It's my fault. I was distracting him when he was driving." She takes the blame for everything. Meanwhile, Brian pretty much just lets her take the blame. He admits to pushing Gabby, but he makes it sound like it's not a big deal. He says that she just gets worked up and she swung at him first. Both Brian and Gabby have marks on them, Brian on his face and Gabby on her face and her arm. Their behavior, though, is the most noticeable difference between them. Brian is calm, chilled out, he's laughing, he's making jokes with the officers. It's just any other day for him. Gabby, on the other hand, is visibly distraught. She can hardly get any words out other than apologies, and it's clear that she is in distress. But she takes all the blame for it. She doesn't want to say anything or do anything to make Brian feel bad or get him in trouble, because that has been the pattern their entire relationship. She apologizes because it's the only thing she knows how to do. In the end, they both decided not to press charges against each other despite their visible injuries, because Gabby took responsibility of being the primary aggressor. The officers called her the primary aggressor, which should not have happened because it was clear that she wasn't. The couple was separated for the night. Gabby kept the van and the officers got Brian a hotel room. This part of the documentary shattered me because the look on Gabby's face, she looks broken. She looks exhausted from the relationship, exhausted from always taking the blame for putting Brian's feelings above her own. She looks like someone who needs help but doesn't want to ask for it. The only thing she asked for was to call her mom. And it's chilling because in the body cam footage, when the officers are discussing amongst themselves, deciding on what to do, one of them says, quote, "Too many times women who are at risk want to go back to their abuser, and then they end up getting worse and worse treatment, and then they end up getting killed." But after they discussed it, the officers decided that it was more of a mental health crisis than anything else, and they all went their separate ways. I cannot imagine how the officers must feel after learning how Gabby and Brian's story ended. It's horrible. 10 days after that incident, Gabby texts her ex-boyfriend. They end up talking on the phone, catching up, and then she says something that makes him think that her and Brian were not on good terms, and then she brings up that she's been thinking about leaving him but hasn't figured out how or when. Based on that phone call, the ex-boyfriend says that it almost sounded like a cry for help, and he made sure to let her know that he would be there for her should she need anything. August 25th, Gabby FaceTimes her mom and she makes an Instagram post. That would be the last time that she would speak to her mom on the phone and the last post that she would ever make. August 27th of 2021, Gabby calls her ex-boyfriend again, but he's unable to pick up the call because he was at work. That day, Gabby and Brian were caught on CCTV footage shopping at Whole Foods. That was the last known footage of Gabby Petito. Authorities are almost positive that Brian ended her life that night. 3 days later, on August 30th, Nicole gets a text from Gabby letting her know that she had no service, but one thing stood out about that text. In the same message, Gabby talked about her grandpa, but she referred to him as Stan, and Gabby never called her grandpa Stan. She called him Grandpa. The next day, September 1st, as well as September 2nd, September 6th, and 7th, Gabby's mom is texting her, failing to get a hold of her. She's trying not to freak out, assuming that maybe they were traveling through somewhere that had very little or no phone service. September 9th, Nicole texts Gabby's father, Joe, asking if he had heard from Gabby. He hadn't. Gabby's ex-boyfriend hadn't heard from her either. Gabby's best friend didn't hear from her on her birthday, which was weird. Gabby's parents and step-parents at this point are thinking Gabby and Brian are missing. They're together and we can't get a hold of them. So Nicole reaches out to Brian's mother, Roberta. She asks if she has heard from either Brian or Gabby and says that she's getting worried because she hasn't heard from Gabby in about 10 days. The text says delivered, but no response. She texts her again later that day, and that text sends in green, meaning Roberta either blocked Nicole or her phone was dead, but I really doubt that her phone was dead. Then Gabby's dad reaches out to the Laundrie family. Silence. The parents weren't responding. The sister wasn't responding either. And then Gabby's family got a sick feeling. It was clear that Brian's family wanted nothing to do with them, so they decided to put pictures out of Gabby asking for help in finding her in as many places as they could. They posted it all over social media. They called every police station. They called every park located where Gabby and Brian were supposed to be traveling all around the West Coast. And on September 11th of 2021, they called to officially report Gabby Petito a missing person. That same night, officers went to Brian
Brian Laundrie's home. They pull up, they see Gabby's van on their driveway. They knock on the door. Brian's parents answer, and do you want to know the first thing they said? Actually, the only thing they said their son Brian was home. He had been home for days, and they said that they had an attorney and they would not be answering any more questions. They were refusing to speak. So up until this point, Gabby's parents thought that Gabby and Brian were missing, assuming that they were missing together, and then they find out that Brian is home without Gabby with her van. But Gabby was nowhere to be found, and Brian had lawyered up. This made her entire family feel sick. They knew that Brian had done something to her. Overnight, this case was everywhere, and I remember it clear as day. This case is rare in the sense that we lived through it. We saw it unfold, and I remember there being new information out about the case every single day. Gabby's dad flew to Florida to spread awareness. Gabby's stepdad flew to Wyoming, where Gabby was last seen. Her mother was doing everything that she could back home in Long Island, and her stepmother was incredibly involved as well. It was an all-hands-on-deck situation with one goal and one goal only: to bring Gabby Petito home. Gabby Petito's last known location was in Grand Teton National Park. Law enforcement was searching everywhere. Search and rescue was there. The FBI quickly got involved, and then the body cam footage from August 12th from that incident in Moab was released, and this only made the case blow up on social media even more. Authorities were receiving 200 to 300 tips daily. A woman came forward saying that she gave Brian a ride August 29th, but he wasn't with Gabby. Another girl on TikTok made a video saying that her and her boyfriend gave Brian a ride around the time that Gabby was believed to have gone missing. Another couple came forward who was a part of the van life community. They vlogged very often as well, and when they looked back at the footage that they have when Gabby was believed to have disappeared, they noticed that they caught Gabby's white van on video. That information was a massive break in the case because it narrowed down the location of where Gabby was last seen. September 17th of 2021, Brian Laundrie is reported as missing. His parents declared Brian missing and said they hadn't seen him in 3 days. They said that they thought he could be in the Carlton Reserve in Sarasota County, but said they did not report him missing sooner because they thought that he just went hiking and was planning on coming back. Police began searching for him in the reserve, but the bad weather delayed their search. Meanwhile, another group of officers is searching Brian's home. At his house, they find a note from Brian's mom, Roberta, written to Brian that was labeled "Burn After Reading." In the note, she writes that there is nothing that Brian could do that would make her stop loving him. On a different line in the note, Roberta writes, quote, "If you need to dispose of a body, I will show up with a shovel and garbage bags," end quote. And I think now is a good time to mention the phone records authorities found. On August 29th, a couple days after Gabby Petito was last seen, Brian called his mom, Roberta. He spoke to her for about 55 minutes. Almost immediately after, his father called an attorney and then wired the attorney $25,000. During that time, Brian is texting Gabby as if he wasn't with her, although records show that their phones were right next to each other when they were texting, which I think is safe to say that Brian was just trying to create an alibi. The day after that, Brian starts making the drive back with Gabby's van without Gabby, uses Gabby's debit card to pay for gas in the process, then sends money from Gabby's account to his own with the memo being, quote, "Goodbye, Brian, I'll never ask you for anything again," which again is him trying to create an alibi. 2 days after Brian was reported missing by his parents on September 19th of 2021, authorities go out and they search the area where Gabby and Brian were last known to be camping at the Spread Creek camping area in Wyoming. And shortly after that, 22-year-old Gabby Petito was found. Her body was wrapped up in a sweater. She was lying on her side, described to be laying in an unnatural position. Her cause of death was ruled a homicide by blunt force trauma and manual strangulation. Authorities believe that Gabby's body had been there since August 27th. Her family was devastated. It was the outcome that nobody wanted, and it broke their hearts. It broke the hearts of everyone that loved her, which were a lot of people. Brian Laundrie was a person of interest, the only person of interest. Authorities believe that Brian was responsible for ending Gabby's life, and then he moved her body to where it was found. Brian was still missing, and they needed to find him immediately. October 20th of 2021, a month after Brian was reported missing, his remains were found. Brian's belongings and his body were found by his parents and authorities at the park where he was believed to have gone hiking. Brian's parents claim that they really thought that he just went out hiking and was planning on returning home, but we don't know how true that is. It was ruled that Brian Laundrie unalived himself. With the human remains, they also found a backpack, a weapon, and a notebook. In the notebook, Brian wrote goodbye letters to his family, but he also wrote an explanation as to what happened to Gabby, which I want to make sure we know it's a lie because it does not match up with her autopsy report at all, but this is what he wrote. I'm just reading parts of it because it's quite lengthy. Quote, "I'm sorry to everyone this will affect. Gabby was the love of my life and I know adored by many. I'm so very sorry to her family because I love them. I'd consider her younger siblings my best of friends. I am sorry to my family. This is a shock to them as well as a terrible grief. They loved her as much, if not more than me. A new daughter water to my mother and to my nephews. Please do not make this harder for them. This occurred as an unexpected tragedy, rushing back to our car trying to cross the streams before it got too dark to see, too cold. I heard a splash and a scream. I could barely see. I couldn't find her for a moment. I shouted her name. I found her breathing heavily, gasping. She was freezing cold. When I pulled Gabby out of the water, she couldn't tell me what hurt. She had a small bump on her forehead that eventually got larger. Her feet hurt, her wrist was hurting, and she was freezing, shaking violently. While carrying her, she continually made sounds of pain. Lying next to her, she said little, between violent shakes, gasping in pain, begging for an end to her pain. I don't know the extent of Gabby's injuries, only that she was in extreme pain. I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it was what she wanted, but I see now the mistake I made. I panicked. I was in shock, but from the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her, end quote. In my personal opinion, it is very clear what happened here. Brian ended Gabby's life. He called his parents for help. They gave him the help, and then he ended his own life, taking all and any answers with him to the grave. Gabby Petito's memory lives on and will live on forever. Her family and friends are determined to keep her memory alive and to live with kindness, the way that Gabby Petito lived. Her family started the Gabby Petito Foundation. Their mission is to together make a difference, save lives, reunite families with missing loved ones, and prevent tragedies like Gabby's from happening to anyone else. This case breaks my heart. It broke my heart from the moment that I first heard about it. That is all I have for today's video. Please remember to be kind, check on your friends, tell the people that you love them that you love them. And I will see you guys in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. I love you very much.
I don't know if you guys have heard of the case of a 14-year-old girl who shot her mom 3 times in the face, calls her friend up talking about some, have you ever seen a dead body, and then proceeds to tell them that she has 3 more bullets waiting for her stepdad when he gets home. Let me give y'all a backstory. I have my notes, so you know I'm giving the details. Ashley Smiley is a very loving teacher in Northwest Rankin High School in Flowood, Mississippi. She was previously married, and that's when she had Carly, but then she divorced the partner that she had at that time and got remarried with a man named Heath Smiley when Carly was about 5 years old. Now, her new partner, Heath, a lot of people are questioning his innocence in this case, so we'll definitely get into that a little bit later. Ashley, Heath, and Carly, they all lived together during the time that Carly, her mother. Carly is a student in the same high school that her mom works in. And she's described as a very sweet girl. Like, nobody's ever had any issues with her. As she grew up, their relationship kind of grew apart. They began arguing more often than usual. And that kind of led to Carly being a lot more rebellious. She started sneaking out. Who knows if she was lying, etc., etc. So Ashley and Carly's stepfather, they ended up getting a therapist for her for anxiety and depression because they did notice that her behavior was little. They did assume that it was just like a teenager phase. You know, we've all had our phases when we were teenagers that we acted a little bit. But then on Tuesday, March 19th, 2024, it started off as a normal day. Carly went to school with her mom and they went their separate ways. Carly went to her class, and then her mom started working in her assigned classroom. Once the school day was over, they went home. They got home around 4 p.m. But then a student had actually told Ashley previously that Carly has started smoking, like vapes and something green. And as a worried parent, you know, she actually started snooping around her room. Now, me personally, I probably would have asked my daughter first, but maybe she wanted to physically see something that can prove that case. It is just something a student had told her at this point. Now, as Ashley is still in Carly's room, Carly is seen walking past the kitchen camera. She's almost like peeking in as though she's checking if anybody's in there. But when you look closer, it almost seems like she's holding something behind her back, which we now know was actually her father's gun that she had grabbed from her parents' bedroom. So in the camera, which it has sound, by the way, you can hear the audio, Carly is seen walking towards the room, which, like I said, her mom is in. Just a few seconds later, all you hear is a loud bang with pure terror of screams coming from Ashley, and then 2 more shots after that. It's always terrifying to hear the last moments of somebody's life, so it isn't an easy watch. So after firing those shots to her mother, she goes back to the kitchen, sits down on the bar stool as though nothing happened, grabs her mother's phone, and texts her stepdad, "When are you coming home, honey?" pretending to be her mother. You can even hear her humming a song in the audio. Not creepy at all, right? He then responds, you know, he'll be home around 4:30, maybe even a little later. Right after that, Carly then texts a friend saying that she has an emergency and if she can come over. So of course she comes over and she meets her at the door and immediately asks, "Have you ever seen a dead body?" She proceeds to walk her friend over to her room where her dead mother is laying with her face up, towel over her head, and her arms are up. I'm immediately sprinting the fuck out that house. No way you're catching me seeing that. That's when she turns to her friend and tells her, "I gave 3 to my mom and I have 3 more waiting for my stepdad when he comes home." So it's like 5:03 p.m. at this point, right? And Heath is just pulling into the driveway, expecting to see, you know, his wife and his stepdaughter, who, by the way, just texted him not that long ago. Now, there is speculation that she told her friend to go wait in the backyard because her father's about to come in. And at this point, she took the camera in the kitchen and hid it in the fridge. So Heath parks his car and he doesn't even put a foot inside of the kitchen door entry before all he sees is flash and a big bang right towards him. Let me tell y'all what he said in court. Didn't get the door open more than 4 inches wide before seeing a flash and hearing a loud bang. He quickly grabs the gun from Carly and she jumps back towards the island counter screaming loudly. He quickly grabs the gun from Carly and she jumps back towards the island counter screaming so loudly he thought that she had seen a demon. So in that moment, he thought that there was an intruder and that Carly had mistaken him for the intruder, which is why she shot at him. Carly runs off and he begins searching the house with the same gun that he took from Carly, searching for a threat. But as he's searching the house, that's when he enters Carly's room and sees Ashley's dead body on the ground. Now, this is where I start questioning the facts. Carly grabs the gun, shoots her mom, sends her dad a message pretending to be her mom, invites a friend over to look at her dead mom's body, all on camera. But the moment her dad comes home, that's when she chooses to hide the camera? It just makes no sense to me. And now you're telling me that he managed to grab a firing gun 3 feet away from him without being in critical condition? And to make things even weirder, Heath is seen blowing kisses to Carly and telling her, "I love you," as though she didn't just murder his wife. During court, by the way. That's a bit fishy. Once he grabbed the gun, Carly made a run for it. She jumped over the fence and her friend, who was assumed to be in the backyard at the time, running behind her, but then they ended up splitting ways. All while Heath is calling 911. Now, I want y'all to watch this clip and really pay attention to his demeanor.
How much did Ashley love Carly?
They loved each other so much. She just, everything she did, she planned out for Carly and around Carly.
Very serious demeanor, right? Now, watch this one.
Tell us about yours and Carly's relationship before March 19, 2024.
We were always good. We laughed and played and messed around, loved video games.
Why did this man start cheesing at the mere thought of Carly, the girl who murdered his wife, her own mom? This case has definitely piqued my interest. It's not all black and white. Something definitely is going on between Carly and Heath, and something also did happen behind those doors that we will never know. From one true crime geek to another, thank y'all for listening. I'll be back.
2 teenage girls committed the perfect murder, murdering their own mother in cold blood, and they almost got away with it. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Linda Anderson, also known as the Bathtub Girls murder. In 2003, 44-year-old Linda was a single mother to 3 children. She had 2 teenage daughters, 16-year-old Sandra and 15-year-old Elizabeth, who also went by Beth, and she also had an infant son. Linda struggled badly with depression and she would use alcohol as a source of comfort. More often than not, she would be blackout drunk, trying to suppress the feelings and the pain that she was feeling inside. After her second husband was convicted of domestic violence in 2001 and left the family, this only worsened the depression and the dependency on alcohol that Linda had. She was left to raise 3 children all alone. She was juggling 2 jobs trying to make ends meet, and she was also actually going to college. She was trying to better herself so that she could get a better job to better support her family. However, again, Linda really struggled with all this and was dependent on alcohol. Her drinking only got worse. Linda's alcoholism greatly affected the family. She was unable to see the signs that her second husband was SAing her oldest daughter Sandra from the age of 12-year-old. The children would go without necessities such as food. In a later interview, Sandra would say that them actually having something to eat at dinner time was like a special occasion in their house. Because Linda was so often passed out drunk, Sandra and Elizabeth were forced to take on most of the upkeep inside of the house, including raising their younger brother. And in all, the family lived in poverty, they lived in depression. Sandra would describe it as living in torture. Being teenagers, Sandra and Elizabeth didn't say or they didn't recognize that Linda was struggling badly and she was fighting an addiction. Of course, the neglect of her children is not acceptable whatsoever. However, this family were failed by so many services that are supposed to be in place to protect them. There should have been measures put in place to help them all. And it's not as if that the neglect was something that was unknown to people. Sandra would actually speak to a priest when she was 12, and she told the priest about the SA that was happening to her, and he turned around and told Sandra to tell her abuser to just stop it. The priest physically told her, "You tell this older man who is abusing you to stop abusing you or you'll tell your mum." He didn't go and report this to the police or social services. Of course, Sandra was telling her abuser to stop it, but he was never going to listen. The girls began to resent their mother and they would grow jealous of their other friends who were often bought nice new clothes and lived in houses that had swimming pools. It got to a point where the girls hated their mother. They detested her. They saw Linda as someone that was in the way of having a nice life, and so together the two teenage girls began to plot how they were going to murder their mother so that they could claim her life insurance money. This was around $133,000 and they planned to claim that money to buy a house in Europe and move there. Sandra and Elizabeth logged onto their computer and took to the internet to research what would be the quickest and easiest way to kill someone. Eventually they decided on drowning. It was the easiest to stage and quote, it would be fast and unspectacular. They planned to drug Linda, and when she was so incapacitated that she didn't know what was going on, they would take her to their bath and drown her, and that is exactly what they did. They openly shared this plan with their friends who egged them on and even wished them luck. On the 18th of January 2003, from around about dinner time, Sandra and Elizabeth would serve their mum glasses of vodka, which they had spiked with Tylenol and codeine. Soon as Linda took the last sip out of the glass, one of the girls would be extra fast in refilling it with more drugs in, ensuring that the drugs were going to take effect on her. By the late afternoon, Linda was pelagic drunk and heavily drugged. She was so intoxicated that she could barely walk. And Sandra and Elizabeth decided that now was the perfect time. They filled up the bath and helped their mother inside. The girls would take turns giving her little massages, and this little detail just breaks me heart because even though I know that Linda is incapacitated and she's heavily drugged and she wouldn't really have known what was going on, she probably appreciated this small act of kindness from her girls who were usually very cold towards her. Little did she know what their plan actually was. They asked her to spin around on her front so that they could give her a little back rub, and when she did, they forced her head under the water and Linda was so incapacitated that she couldn't fight back. Sandra would physically time 4 minutes before pulling her mother's head out of the water to ensure that they had killed her, which they did. They horrifyingly held their mother's head underwater until she drowned. To establish an alibi, Sandra and Elizabeth would go to a nearby restaurant to get something to eat for their tea. They met their friends there, and this is just before 7 p.m, and they expressed to their friends that they had done it, they had killed their mother. When they arrived back home at around about 10 p.m, Sandra contacted the police, seeming horrified and seeming distraught, telling the dispatcher that she had just found her mother dead. Linda's death would be ruled as an accidental drowning, and for almost a year, Sandra and Elizabeth got away with murder. They would have got away with it had they not bragged about what they had done. Despite hating her mother for her alcoholism and for her drinking, after committing the murder, 16-year-old Sandra would actually turn to the bottle, which was no surprise. She hated herself for what she did. In a recent interview, she told the interviewer that during this time, she was planning to claim the reward money, flee to Amsterdam, farm where she was planning on taking her own life. In January 2004, almost a year to the date of the murder of Linda, a young boy would walk into the police station white as a sheet. He told one of the officers that he had been at a party and there was a girl there, and she was describing in detail about a heinous murder that she had committed. This girl was Sandra. Some reports would describe this boy as being Sandra's boyfriend at the time, but others said that he wasn't. He agreed to work with the police and wore a wire inside of a rigged car to go and pick up the sisters and try and extract more information from them. Over the course of about a month, Sandra and Elizabeth would tell this boy everything. The neglect, the planning, the accomplices that they had, the person who supplied them with the drugs that they used to drug their mother, or the planning that went into it, how they did it, and how they managed to cover it up. These confessions shocked the police because up until this very moment, they believed that Linda's death was an accidental drowning, but hearing these girls talking about this in such detail, it was undeniable that they were involved. Police searched through the sisters' computer, and there they would find all of the searches that the girls had made when they were planning the murder. They would uncover emails where they discussed the murder and uncover text messages as well. The evidence against the sisters was overwhelming. At the end of January 2004, a now 17-year-old Sandra and 16-year-old Elizabeth would be arrested and charged with first-degree murder. At their trial, they would be found guilty, and both of them were handed the maximum sentence for minors, which at the time was 10 years imprisonment. They would each only serve 4 years before being released. It was decided that the true identity of Linda, Sandra and Elizabeth were never to be revealed. This was because both of the girls were minors when the murder happened. That is why I haven't included any photos throughout this video and why I have had to use aliases throughout. In 2020, Sandra sat down for an interview and she seemed genuinely remorseful for what she had done. She would describe being a stupid, naive teenager and not realising that her mother was struggling. She would describe her mother as her best friend, and she expressed that she wished her mother was still here to meet her grandchildren. Sandra is also a single mother, so she can relate to how difficult that can be. Since her release, Sandra has been in therapy. She has graduated from university and now works as a scientist. Elizabeth hasn't spoke out whatsoever since the murders. All we know about her is that she is a law school graduate and a mother.